Why screenwriting?
That's a great question to start with. I think it's just basically two things, and one is when I was young, the thing that came before I wanted to tell stories, which I think is very integral to wanting to write screenplays, is a love for movies and a love for cinema. And so I think I just became like a movie addict first, without any sort of concern whatsoever for the idea of writing a screenplay. Just kind of getting a rush from movies and watching movies and talking about movies and wanting to introduce my friends to movies. So for me, I think that was the first the amuse-bouche on the palette before I launched into storytelling. Storytelling was something else. Storytelling was the idea that there was a message that I wanted to convey, a statement that I wanted to say, and usually and that didn't really sort of progress until for me, I was in my early 20s, and I had these ideas, and I would see these great films from people that were expressing at the time for me these kind of subjects that dealt with things that hit me in the heart and at my core, for who I was as a young adult, as a young black male adult. And one example, of course, would be two examples would be John Singleton and Spike Lee. And I thought, hey, I want to tell stories that have like messages that are akin to that have that kind of, that relate to, to people like me. So that was the impetus. And then I went on a journey of trying to discover how to do that. And that entailed mining what I love about the written word, and that also involves, a love of literature, a love of storytelling of all types. I think that screenplays are usually just elaborate short stories, just unspooled in a slow fashion, across 12 beats, which would make it 3 acts. But yeah, I hope that wasn't too long.
No, it was perfect. You said something about mining the written word. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can you expand?
Well, it what I mean by that is that when it comes to writing screenplays specifically, you're telling us a story in pictures, and to tell a story in pictures, you have to use these blunt little tools that are called words. And you have to find new and different ways to use those words, juxtapose those words, abuse those words even, to make a picture out of a scene. If you have a scene in which there isn't any sort of banter, you don't have two characters exchanging dialogue, you have to create what amounts to an interpretation or a blueprint that the director is going to work from, and on all the other attendant people involved. So that is mining the written word. You have to find the right words to do so. So I mean, so even as I speak right now, you'll find this affects, I think, the DNA of writers and screenwriters, because I think writers intrinsically are always seeking, even as they speak, the right word to use. Because when it comes to writing, you're sitting there, you're being still, you're being patient. If you were born sometime before 1980, you were in front of a blank page. If you were born somewhere after 1990, you're in front of a blank screen, and you're waiting. You're waiting to get just the right word to string next to another word to get right, to be a correct approximation of what you want the director or producer or even the reader to take away from the experience of that scene.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been writing scripts in a scattered fashion for I'll be told about 23 years. And yeah, that's the long and short.
23 years. And so was there a point when you almost walked away from screenwriting?
Absolutely.
Or should I ask which time, or what happened each time?
Absolutely. I'd say a few times early in the game, especially when it seemed really hard. But the thing that kept bringing me back was pretty easy. Is it wouldn't let me go. I think that's a complex thing to answer, because I think if you intrinsically feel called to write, people say that, and it sounds really pretentious. It's like you were called to be a part of the monastery, like you're a Jesuit somewhere. This is not. I know it sounds pretentious, but it does actually exist. And if you survey a number of writers, they will sometimes use that phrase because they find that they can't pull themselves or wrestle themselves away from the computer. That they have to come back and they have to work at something because it's nagging at them, and it won't stop nagging at them until it's finished. And so for me, it was like that, and it was only when after a period of time in which it started to become a little facile, it started to become a little easy, that I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to keep going, So there are other things too. There's little lessons that you learn along the way. There's examples from other writers that you pick up that give you a really strong skill set to use and to borrow from, that make it real simple in my mind. I can expound on that for maybe 2 hours. And I'm actually not kidding. So if we wanted to get into that, but yeah, there's stuff like that.
So you found it got easier for you, and you were okay with the fact that there was something sort of pulling you to do this, that it almost felt like it was beyond your control.
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically what it is. If I wanted to get a little bit more flowery about it, some people, some people believe in a higher power, some people believe in a muse. You know, so I think that with writing, there's always something that is pulling you towards writing it and the story.
And what kind of stories were you pulled toward? I mean, you said there were certain filmmakers, John Singleton, Spike Lee, that you wanted to emulate, that you wanted to make movies similar to theirs.
Yeah. In the beginning, I was very interested in writing stories that were kind of carbon copies of the kind of stories that they were telling. That soon started to evolve. I started to become interested in telling a little bit more action-oriented, almost elongated, well, not really elongated, but like a sort of cinematic comic book-esque type stories, because I love comic books and I grew up on comic books, and that started to become incorporated into the kind of writing I was doing. And all the while, as I was developing my craft, I was, as usual, seeing more movies, more kinds of movies, different kinds of movies. I'm a big proponent of writing styles that aren't exclusive to what happens in Hollywood or in America. I think that what happens in Europe and Britain, I think the Hong Kong filmmakers and writers are excellent. I think, for example, of course, John Woo, Wong Kar-wai, the European filmmakers, Michael Haneke, Krzysztof Kieslowski, Mike Lee. These are all, they all provide a different set of tools that you can also bring and use. And so along the way, I found myself almost kind of coming full circle back to what I wanted to tell in the first place, or the kind of stories I wanted to tell in the first place, but with a more assured voice, with my voice, as opposed to being more of a carbon copy or a copy,
Michael Clayton?
Interesting. Love that movie. Why I love that movie is a couple reasons. I think that that one of the finest filmmakers and writers in the business is Tony Gilroy. His work is indelible. His screenplays are extraordinary. If you want to talk about terse action, suspense, drama, and any kind of suspense that feels rooted in reality, as opposed to being too cartoonish, that is Tony Gilroy. And if for anyone who doesn't know his attach his name to his films, we're talking The Devil's Advocate. He wrote the first three Bourne movies, and of course the gorgeous and beautiful film Michael Clayton, which is basically about a character, about a man who is, as I was saying a little earlier, is stuck in a sort of nomad's land, because he has this he's burdened by being able to do certain things that render him antisocial in the world. Yet he's still a very useful figure. He's a commodity, and he's a commodity that is to the detriment of his own well-being in many ways. So love that film. What's really great about that film, though, is what it does and what it blends is that it takes all the excitement that you get, all the boys stuff that you like, if you're a boy, with bad guys and good guys and good triumphing over evil and the gray areas that exist in between, and it marries it with drama that is really, really, I think, socially relevant and gives a message and harkens back to a lot of those 70s films. And those are the films I grew up on and were the films that I became a fan of when I was a kid. Those were films like Sidney Lumet's films, like Dog Day Afternoon or Serpico or any of those. Network, phenomenal film. But yeah.
Right, and where you were talking about the gray area in between, and sometimes where the gangster in the film is not actually the worst character in the end, we find out that it was the one that had the appearance of sort of the straight and narrow, but actually where sort of their morals got, it's interesting. I feel like, I'm not even sure where I'm going with that. I know we were watching something.
Moral ambiguity.
Okay, moral ambiguity.
That's the word.
Okay, thank you. And discovering that in a character, because it's not always it's not always obvious to the audience. And when we find that the one that we suspected was the bad one actually had more of a code of honor or ethics than one that looked squeaky clean and we thought we could trust. So it's those gray areas, and you see
absolutely.
it in the news and in life. Yeah,
absolutely. That's what I enjoy about that kind of work. I think that I personally, and I don't think everyone feels the same way, but I feel that work like that enlightens you about areas of the human condition is edifying, because you grow an insight, and then you have the potential to take that insight, whether it is creatively or otherwise, you take it and you can potentially evolve yourself. So that's.
Christian, what's more fun for you, writing your screenplays or reading them?
Sometimes I don't even know if I like writing my screenplays. I'm usually starting a screenplay sucks. That part usually sucks. When you get in the zone, that's it. When you get into the zone of writing a script, that's when it gets really, you get jonesed. That means that you actually enjoy waking up at 7 to 8 a.m., even sometimes earlier, like around 6, and you put on the coffee and sit down in front of the computer and to keep moving it forward, because you're confident as to where all the pieces fit and where you're going. And even if you're not confident, you know that it's like you're getting in the car again after a pit stop, running the Le Mans, and you know you're going to win the race if you as long as you keep the lug bolts on the tires. So that's when it's fun. But sometimes it takes a while to get to that place. I do realize that for some people it never is fun in the process. You can be slogging it out, quite a bit. And I do recall when it was, for me, it was never fun writing it until I got to the second draft. Till I got to rewriting, then I'd go, oh wait, this is not that bad. And I'd feel like I was like digging through, a pile of trash that I'm salvaging some articles that didn't need to be thrown away. But yeah, that's when for me, now that it gets fun, I don't take any particular pride out of reading anything I've written. I don't know. I guess it's sort of like watching yourself on screen, which is a meta thing to say as this is occurring. It doesn't occur to me to want to read anything I've written, other than to check it for mistakes or errors, and to make sure that it aligns properly in accordance to structure and that sort of thing.
So writing the first draft at times sounds like energizing, but at other times not?
Well, I mean, it's energizing when you're, like I said, when you're in the zone. So meaning so you start writing, and for me, and I'm gonna preface this by saying, because you referenced this before we start talking about the debate of outlining, and when I was a kid, or when I was younger, I should say, I did quite a bit of outlining, and I learned a specific method on how to outline from some very reputable folks. And I've abandoned that entirely. I don't recommend that to anyone. If somebody's new writing, outlining is absolutely essential in my mind. I know people have differing opinions about that, but it's absolutely essential. But I do think that once you have a grasp of what you're doing, that you can feel absolutely free to get rid of it when you're ready, when you find your voice. There's a thing. It's like the Picasso analogy. It's like once you know the rules, you can throw them away. Picasso was a fine naturalistic painter at age 10. Okay? At age 10, all right? By the time he's in his early 20s, he can start to experiment a little, So same thing applies to screenwriting, I believe. So for me, I start a script and I have like a satellite number of notes. Those notes are usually jotted down on something. These days, they're in my phone. I use the note field, and I throw little ideas in there. Sometimes bits of dialogue and things like that. When they accumulate to a point, and there's a number of these going on at once. I mean, a number of story ideas. When they accumulate to a point, I open up a file on my computer, and I start stringing those notes together. Once I start stringing those notes together, I'll transfer those to a final draft file, and I'll start spacing them out, like I'm piecing together a puzzle. You take a puzzle and you start with the edges first. I will go, oh, this might go like around here in the story, and this might go around here in the story, and this might go around here. And then I repeatedly return to that final draft file and stare at it and go, let's put something in here, and let's put something in there, and let's put something in here, and continually build it based on that rubric. And then when it starts to become something fulsome, and I start to get energized by it, I might spend more time on it. So like 2 hours, 3 hours. Once I'm spending like 6 hours a day on it, it's happening. You know, I'm at that point, I'm in the zone, and I am like forgetting sometimes to get lunch because I'm so I'm so wrapped up in the story. There you go.
I believe you've referenced Dorothy Parker many times, where you say the famous remark of hers, "I hate to write, I love having written."
Yes.
I know we were talking a little bit about her off screen. How do you relate to that quote?
Well, absolutely relate to that quote. Writing is hard. It's tough for a couple of reasons. There's two sides of that coin. That the actual activity itself is taxing, and it requires a lot of patience, and also it is one of those chosen vocations where one is likely to suffer a great deal of critique, scrutiny, and attack. So all of that together makes it tough. So you have to sort of build a sort of thick skin. Now, with that comes the great myths of the writers, and all the writers that I can think of, and this is across all genres of writing. Most of them have this aura of strength and promotion of that strength as a writer and in their writing. And the finest examples of it is Dorothy Parker is probably one of the pinnacle of that idea of strength, as well as someone of course like Ernest Hemingway, Hunter S. Thompson, James Baldwin. All of these characters convey strength, and that is a quality that comes from having to deal with the rigors of being a writer, of putting in those hours, of spending that time, of building your voice as a writer, and to have conviction as a writer.
And it also speaks to something a little bit that we talked about just a few minutes ago, which was the character that you were referring to in Michael Clayton. Mm-hmm. And that is, they don't really fit in this box, they don't fit in that box. They there's not really a place for them, but they can't just fade away.
This is true. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely true. I think that's an interesting analogy and an interesting point that you're bringing up. I think that once you go down the road, I always get Thoreau and Emerson confused, but I believe it was Thoreau. The road not taken, so to speak. Once you go down the road not taken, a friend of mine used to say, it gets a little sketchy down there because the road not taken is often patrolled by the cops. So, once you go down that road, don't expect to not face adversity, you know, and don't expect it to not change you. Don't expect it to not to not make you something that you don't expect that you're going to be. You will more than likely become smarter, wiser. You will have survival skills that you probably didn't expect that you would gain, but it will turn you into something else.
That's really interesting. For better or worse,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Right. I like what you said, how going down this road that's, you know, there's not, it's kind of a dark, murky road where you're not really sure what's in the shadows, but it also is maybe sort of a metaphor for what a lot of writers have been maybe more alone, or I know outcast is not the right word, but they're used to having to be their own strength.
Well, I mean,
Or is
yeah,
that a cliche?
to a degree. I mean, like, I know a lot of writers, and I've spent a lot of time around writers. This is a whole other subject matter. We can get into this in a bit, but being alone as a writer is not so bad, because writers aren't really alone. It's a kind of illusion, because writers are besieged especially if they're writing stories, they're besieged with characters that live with them. So, and it's this misnomer to say a writer is alone. In fact, it's like writers in a sense, if you want to call them, you know, antisocial, they aren't antisocial by, you know, I think by nature. They're antisocial by choice, because they just want to get back to the people they know. or the people that they're currently entertained with, and I think that that's really what it is. I think also, conversely, many writers are extraordinarily gregarious. My personal MO, I think, is that I have two sides, and those two sides are: I can be incredibly quiet, totally bashful, really shy, a real introvert, and then I swing way to the other side, and I can be incredibly gregarious and an extrovert and highly social, and, you know, and loud and boisterous and all those things. I don't know what that means, but I do know that is not something that is unusual. That many writers fill that mold.
What are your core beliefs about pursuing a writing career?
That's like huge. That is, and what I mean by huge is like there's so many things there. The main thing is, for me, is you just have to be committed, and you have to have passion as a writer, regardless of what genre of writing you're working on. I think that first and foremost, that you have to consider yourself a writer, not a screenwriter, but rather a writer. That's just me. Some people might say otherwise, but you really have to consider yourself a writer, because if you don't understand how to take writing out of the arena of solely just crafting spec scripts, pilots for TV and feature screenplays, you're never going to really develop some innovative skills at actually doing those things that catch people's, attention. So I think that's very important. So that all falls under the ballpark of commitment and passion. So that means that you basically you need your friend is a cup of coffee and your seat in front of that that computer screen. Those are your friends, and you better get comfortable with them. Because you're going to need them. You have to spend the time to learn to do what you want to do. And also, this is the other thing, it's an excavation. And it's not an excavation of the work that's in front of you per se, although it can be. It's an excavation of yourself, because you start to realize who you are as a writer. You start to realize that, let's say, we're using a baseball analogy. You throw a mean curveball, you start to, and you go, oh, wait, I throw a mean curveball. It's like, well, let me work on that a little bit, sort of thing. So that's what you start to learn about yourself. But first, you might just think you're just a good shortstop, when you begin, before you discover your own peculiar talents.
When was that clear to you?
That's an interesting question. And that's going to be fun to talk about. When that was clear to me was when I started writing in general, I wrote a lot of poetry, and I enjoyed writing poetry and the craft of writing poetry. And so I thought that maybe it would be easy to use what I know from poetry writing to develop writing screenplays. I wrote my first screenplay, and I had the great fortune to meet and for a short period of time receive some mentorship from a guy who took a little bit of interest in me, a director from old school Hollywood named Ted Post, and he was very, very gracious and generous to offer to read my first screenplay. And he read it, and he got back in touch with me, and he said to me, he goes, Christian, I gotta tell you, it's like, I think you got some talent. I think you know how to write some dialogue, but you have no idea how to tell a story. And it's like, and I'm like, oh, wow, okay. Gee, well.
Tell me what you really think.
Yeah, exactly. But thanks, And he's like, I want you to go out and I want you to buy this book. And I bought this book called The Art of Dramatic Writing. The most important book, one of the most important books, I should say, and I've read in terms of my writing. Definitely the book that helped set me off on the journey by Lalos Egri. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the book is not so much about writing for the movies as it is the classical elements of telling story as it relates to to the plays of Ibsen, Shakespeare, even a few more modern plays of the early 20th century, such as O'Neill's plays and whatnot. And that really started to break down for me what I understood to be structure. But even then, I was still a bit flummoxed on how to find a way to have a confidence when I would attack a screenplay, because I was like, okay, there's this over here, and I think I have a good idea of voicing characters and writing, interesting dialogue, but I'm not so sure how to marry the two. So I had written one script, and some people were responding to it pretty well, in almost like a lukewarm fashion. But they were like, "Oh, it's got a beginning, a middle, and an ending." And I stumbled across a copy of Shane Black's The Long Kiss Goodnight. And I noticed specifically how Shane wrote his screenplays. These terse little bursts of word formations to convey the atmosphere of the action lines and the descriptions of each scene. It was just so exciting to read that, and how kinetic it was, and how he sort of just kind of like broke certain rules, not broke rules just to break rules, but just broke certain rules so that he could meet certain objectives in a very targeted fashion. And I thought to myself, well, like I can do that. I see what he's doing. I see the architecture underneath it, and I can definitely do that. And furthermore, I found it relate a great deal to what it was like to writing poetry, because poetry is often very elastic with language and with words, and Shane's work was very elastic. So with words and sentences and the grammar, he had paid no attention to grammar, really. It was just all about getting you to understand the scene. And so I took that on, and I rewrote that screenplay that I had, and then boom, lots of people loved that script. In fact, it secured me a finalist position with Tribeca All Access soon after that. And that's when I knew I was on to something. That's when I realized, like, hey, I can do this now. I know what to do. I have all the paints in my in my box of paints. So yeah.
Should someone be fearful with building their entertainment career, or at least cautious?
Yeah, I guess so, but mostly be fearless, because what I mean by that is that there are so many forces that want to strip you of your voice as a writer, and to make you compromise that voice, and to make undermine that voice, and confuse you into thinking that you should undermine your voice. And that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. The greatest writers in screenwriting, we know who they are simply because not only when we read the scripts, their voice is apparent and rises to the surface, but when we see the finished products, it's apparent. I mean, it's like, how do you separate? I mean, the sound of Tarantino. I mean, it's like, the sound of Diablo Cody. You know the sound of Spike Lee. I mean, these people have sounds. That's your voice. And if you're not working, if you're not, sharpening your quiver towards that direction, then you're not going to ever sort of stand out from the crowd, because that's what ultimately is the goal. That's what makes you, if we're going back to our Michael Clayton analogy, that makes you the commodity that cannot be avoided, that people have to come to in the end. He's going, well, we need him to do this. We need to call up I'm forgetting her name. Is it Phoebe Waller-Bridge? We need to call her to punch up a script, because we need that voice. We need that voice, and all you need to do is say her name, and you know what her voice means to that project. It is absolutely paramount that every writer get to that space, because then people, agents, producers, executives, they get bombarded with crap. They get bombarded with a lot of the same of this, or a lot of like this, or or people that sound like Shane Beck. People that sound like this, people like, that want to be David Peoples, people that, and they don't really want that. They want you. They want to know who you are. They want something that's so unique, and that they can go, oh, well, nobody else has that. So this is the one-stop shop where you can go to. You only can go to that store to get that. That's it.
You said, I think writing screenplays specifically is a love for the art of storytelling?
Yeah. And that sort of dovetails to what I was discussing before, a little bit with mining the written word, but it's when but also just to elaborate on that, it's really the classic. It's the classic example of having that command of telling a story around a campfire, and to take people through a journey that keeps them entertained, but also leaves them with something that sort of delights them in a special way. That is the art of storytelling. That is the thing that has occurred time in memoriam since the cavemen were drawing on the sides of the caves. So that's what I'm speaking to, and that's what you do with the screenplay is the first brick in building that wall, the wall where it will be projected eventually. It's the theater is the big cave that we all huddle inside.
I like that. So it's not just the love of the final product, which is seeing these characters come to life and getting an audience reaction to, will they laugh at this part, will they gasp at this part, but also just the real love for crafting it and ruminating over this word, or should this character enter here or there?
Well, I think that all filmmakers, and what I mean by all filmmakers is that all craftspeople in the art of filmmaking, from the writer to the production designer, to the actor, to the director, to hopefully the producers, have a passion for telling stories. And that's where everyone collaborates. That's where everyone comes together, because they go, how can we tell this story in the best possible way? Because everyone's excited about that prospect and that notion. It's actually larger than any one person's aspect on the production. Is no one is the sole avatar of that objective. It's like, oh, how can we tell this great story we're all excited about? How can we succeed at that?
Do you think when a writer reaches a certain level, they no longer need to work on craft?
No. No. That you got to remain teachable as a writer. I think it's extraordinarily important. You always have to be willing to learn. And I think that writers tend to give off this air that they're like poor man intellectuals. I don't think they really are. I think that they have to continually be in a process in which they are allowing themselves to be vulnerable and open to new things. I think they do a good act at seeming to be having a wide array of knowledge. There's the writers actually do talk about this. There's a lecture that incidentally Tony Gilroy gives, where he basically talks about how writers have this amazing capacity to know a little bit about so many various subject matters, but never an extensive amount about one thing. We are, I think, in a sense, dilettantes by nature. In other words, yes, we have to be open. We can't. There's no. So you always got to be practicing. You always have to be honing your work. You're always willing to learn from somebody else. I learned so much from other writers. I love to listen to other writers talk about how they do things and certain techniques and ideas that they apply. I think any true writer is a curiosity junkie. It's just that they just need to keep getting more information, about whatever is, how's this work, or how does that, that's interesting, even if it just flies in one ear and then out the other later, You know, we are curiosity junkies. So
that's fascinating. What is a poor man or poor woman's intellectual? What is that?
Well,
I like that. I might come under that category.
Well, what I mean by that is that I think that writers do a good job of sounding good, of sounding like they know what they're talking about. I think there is a kind of sometimes a kind of intellectual arrogance some writers can have, but I don't think by nature being a writer is a prerequisite or any kind of standard for your intellectual capacity whatsoever. Just because you have a large vocabulary doesn't make you a professor. Often I do believe others get that confused, including the writers themselves.
So we believe our own hype.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe jack of all trades,
see,
master
there you go. There you go. You just explained it in terms that are far more simpler than I just did. Hence, explaining what I was. No, there you have it.
Well, I think I'm further down on the scale. I haven't mastered total intellectual. But what I'm curious is of how can we tell if we're not teachable? You talked about being teachable, and that's something that we never stop, getting to that point where you've never mastered the craft. But how do we know? How can we check ourselves?
That's easy. You just got to listen. That's it. That's it. If you aren't spending enough time listening, it's pretty easy. That's how I think that basically you have to check yourself if you're teachable. You got to listen to people. You have to listen to what others are doing. And if it jibes with you, that's cool. If it doesn't, that's fine. You can go and do your own thing. But it doesn't mean that you need to block it out or you have to discount it, because obviously it works for them. And you don't have to hold any judgment over it either.
You think there are times when we become unteachable and then we kind of vacillate back to being teachable, and it's like this battle?
I think that that's a larger life question, and that comes with a bit of wisdom as a writer. If you're a young writer, you may, and you achieve a modicum of success, you may start to believe that you're beyond any kind of growth, or that you can't develop any further at your craft, and then you might turn around and go, "Oh no, I was absolutely wrong." It's like I do have more to learn. So I don't think that that's just a straight writer inquiry. I think that's a larger question. It goes towards life.
And one last life question, and that is, do you think having early success is a curse?
These are deep philosophical areas you're getting into.
That's my own believing my own hype. So. But I am curious.
I don't know, because I wouldn't know the experience of.
Me neither.
But I think that maybe I've heard some writers suggest that they feel that they were stifled because they received early success. I have experience with writers, and I've known writers and in intimate ways that I know that they've had issues with success because it's a very it's a seismic thing to occur, and often you might get confused and attribute it to something that is beyond even your even the product that you put out there. And if you do that, then you can lose your way, at the thing that you love to do the most, or if that is writing, then you could maybe lose a little time, writing the kind of things that you want to write and developing the kind of projects you want to work on. But yeah, I've heard of such a thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of the scenes I love in the movie End of the Tour, I believe, about David Foster Wallace and the Rolling Stone journalist that comes to his house in Illinois and interviews him for a week.
No, I've never seen that.
Oh, it's so good. And I know it got a lot of criticism. I loved it. I know there were people that had their criticisms of it, but the David Foster Wallace character says, "I cherish my regular guyness." That's something I really cherish. And I'm just assuming that he meant sort of like not believing the hype. He was this young writer, he was 24, I believe, when Infinite Jest came out, and just making sure that he cherished that regular part of himself. Again, I'm projecting onto that, but I just love that scene because here's this young journalist played by Jesse Eisenberg that's coming to interview him and pick him apart and find out what makes him tick, and just the two bond as friends. And it's reminding me of that when you talked about that. So
I have to see that now.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, there's a lot of sad parts to it, but it's based on a real interview that a journalist did with him. Keeping with this subject, the writer who lands success with the first screenplay is a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we still think this is different for us individually?
What do you mean?
Well, so many people think it's going to be different for me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna. This is different. I know other people took them 15 years to get this one film made, but they haven't seen my work yet.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird. It's a funny thing when people approach it that way. To this day, I find it not only cautionary, but I kind of find it tragic that a lot of people come to Hollywood, or just in general, come here with this hope, this dream that they can do this one thing, and I think that the trend has been for the last 30 years about that you can write this knockout one-time screenplay, get it to the right person, and somehow, magically, you will become a star screenwriter. I think that a part of that has to do with the celebrity that has been attached to the screenwriting profession recently. Well, when I say recently, I mean the last 30 years. It wasn't like that always. It was a very behind the scenes profession, and now it has this heightened patina of notoriety that people aspire to. It's like, people wanted to come to or go to Hollywood in the '60s so they could become lead guitarist for some band.
Right.
It's the same. It's the same elusive objective.
This is so gruesome, but you just triggered this memory of when I first came to LA. One of the first things I saw was a girl that had jumped from her balcony. And we may cut this, but her body was covered and the neighbors were all watching. Mm-hmm. This was in Hollywood, and it was like a 4-story balcony. And I never forgot that image because I always wondered, who was she? Why did she jump? Mm-hmm. She was living in this nice apartment, much nicer than the place I lived in, but what would prompt her? And I guess just a reminder of that, and being so young coming here and seeing like this, you can fall, I guess is the analogy. And
yeah.
I know I'm going on a gruesome take here, but it never left me, And
no, yeah. What was her background? I mean, it's like my circumstances here are well, they're actually quite convenient. I'm from Los Angeles. I had no ever desire to get into writing screenplays. It just was something that I was compelled to do. I think, and furthermore, I wasn't compelled necessarily just to write screenplays. I started out writing poetry, and I just wanted to write. I think that that's pretty much the healthiest mode in which anyone starts writing anything. They're writers. They want to write, and then when they identify, oh, I want to do a screenplay. Oh, I want to write a screenplay. Then it's like, oh, great, go ahead, write a screenplay. I don't think your first screenplay is likely to probably get you anywhere, but if you keep writing screenplays, you will learn. And once you start to learn, you will hit a screenplay that'll will turn some heads. That isn't uncommon. That isn't a fantasy. Because it happens. It happens pretty much every day. That is not a fantasy. What is a fantasy is if you come out here with one screenplay and you're going to knock it out the park and you think that that's all you need to do, because that ain't happening.
Do you ever envision your script sitting in a pile on someone's desk or maybe in their study on a weekend and think, what's going to make mine stand out here? What chance do I have?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I look at that, and this is at the risk of sounding redundant, is, I've talked about the whole aspect of the voice. But, the voice is one thing, but, I, in my case, am confident in my voice. Now, you move on to that other word, which is confidence. So with that, with confidence, what you want to do when you have like a polished sample or a polished spec script that you're submitting or somebody's reading, or it doesn't matter who's reading it. It really doesn't, because once you are mincing what eyes are on your script, you're in trouble right there. You need to convince anybody and anyone that what you have is worth seeing turned into a movie. So what that means is you either have to knock them in the head, punch them in the gut, or kick them in the balls. And that's something that you have to be doing in the narrative of your story. And if you know you are doing that with your story, You'll notice what I'm saying here is like, it's not just your script, it's your story. Because your script is a artifice that starts to make someone believe that they are reading a story, a potential movie, something that they get immersed in, that they get lost in. Now, if you're not taking them to that place, if you're not creating that illusion with the words that you mine to do it, then you've lost from the get-go, from the beginning. So that, if anything, is what I imagine if somebody has my script in a pile over the weekend. And the thing is that what I enjoy about that thought or that metaphor is that I've had experience with running the gauntlet of that metaphor. Is like is like when you're like, oh hey, like let me give you that kunk, that'll get your attention, boom, and then you get the call, you get the phone call. It's like, wow, I love your screenplay. Wow, that was amazing. That really hit me. I read 200 scripts over the last 5 days. There's nothing more that you love to hear than that. You go like, and yours got my attention. It's like that is like that's the kind. Well, 200 might be a little, but people read a lot of scripts in the industry, and that's because there's a lot of stuff out there that you got to fight to get through. To have people recognize your talent as a storyteller. So like I said, you got to whack them in the head, punch them in the gut, or kick them in the balls. So, yeah.
Okay. Can you give me an example of a movie that is going to whack them or kick them in the nether region that
The nether region.
Sorry.
The nether region.
In case it's, PG-13, whatever. I'm censoring myself here. Can you give me an example of a movie that if I saw an opening, it would do that? And if that was the script I was reading, I would be feeling that to one degree or another.
Okay. Let me see one that I can think of. Well, just because we were just discussing it, Michael Clayton is great because you have a lawyer who takes off his clothes during a deposition. Immediately I'm like, okay, I'm in.
It doesn't happen every day, hopefully, yeah.
I'm in. You know what I mean? It's like, what is this about? I want to know. I'm curious,
Right. Okay, that works.
So,
yeah.
that's one. I'm always at a loss for pulling examples for some films, at the drop of a hat. Let me see if I can extrapolate. I can if I go down the list of for me of Tony Gilroy movies, it's really actually not so hard with him because you can go to The Bourne Supremacy, which is an amazing opening, one of the great openings, where there's a chase and they find where Bourne is, where he's hiding out with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend dies in the first 10 minutes, I think, of the film, and I'm like, and you're like, the stakes are so high at that point. This is what you have to do with your storytelling most of the time. Now, what I mean by that, when I say whack someone in the head, punch someone in the gut, or kick them in the nether region, so to speak, is that it can be a slow burn too. It doesn't have to be immediate. If it's a slow burn and it hooks you, you'll notice that sooner or later it has you in its grips to the point where you're like, where it'll do something that is so enthralling that it won't leave your memory, that you won't forget it. It just won't go away, you know? And that is what you're doing with storytelling. If you are under the notion or the idea or the misconception that you are trying to express something that you feel is, well, for lack of a better term, you know, I think that some writers, new writers, they get caught up in these masturbatory exercises of emulating, you know, certain other writers and filmmakers that they really admire. And it's just an indulgence because they're just trying to piece together the things that they like, thinking that that's going to make an impression on the reader. But that is not going to do it. You know, what's going to make the impression is someone getting lost in what you're telling them, you know, and the way that you tell them it. And if you get caught up in those kind of details, you're gonna be in trouble, you know. Your people are gonna get bored and they're gonna shut your script, because what really happens with readers, what really happens with executives and producers and people that have very busy schedules is they take 5 pages of your script and they read it and then they put it down if it doesn't hook them. You'll be lucky, actually, if you get 5 pages. You'll be lucky. So those 5 pages, whatever you're doing in those 5 pages, whether it's the way you've written that description, whether it's the way that you've delineated those characters, whether it's a passage of dialogue, they have to be firing on all cylinders. Or it's like, so and so. Next.
It becomes a drink coaster. Yeah.
Next. 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 Yeah, that's the way it works.
Can you give me an example? And I'm trying to come up with a euphemism for the term that you use, but of a writer who's stroking their own ego, a master of their domain, as you so eloquently put it.
They're bad writers. You know, it's like you can't take on someone who is successful, because more than likely they're doing something right. Do you know what I'm saying? So you can't. I can't cast aspersions against anybody that's successful at what they're doing, because they're doing something right to get people's attention. So it's simply just that. It's like keep people turning the page, you know, and tell your story. But you gotta keep them excited, or they'll throw it away. Sometimes I've gotten into the situation, and this happens a lot, where someone will say, Send me a couple of screenplays. Send me 3 scripts or something like that, right? Now you have to be smart about that, all right? Because when you do that, you go, well, maybe they'll like this, maybe they won't like that, and maybe they'll like that over here, all right? So you send it. And sometimes they'll go, you know what? I've been reading Powell's scripts, and you know, one of your scripts, you know, I just didn't really connect with, but the other one, because you know what you're doing. That's the confidence I'm talking about. You know what you're doing. It's like, well, maybe they're not. This is not the sort of thing that they're in. That's their oeuvre. but maybe this over is like, that's a little conversely on the other side of that, of this kind of subject matter. So that's what the game is. That's what the strategy is behind the game. The game is getting them hooked. Just as you would be hooked if you were in the theater watching the story. All right? Because if it reaches that stage, like we said, if we're successful to get to that point, then you must be doing something right. You know, you must be doing even the more lackluster stories still are stories.
How did you figure out your voice?
I yelped into the wind, and no. You know what? When you asked me that question, immediately the first thing that popped into my mind, and it really has nothing to do with anything we're discussing, was the first few lines of James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and what that story and that book means as a tale about this modernist tale that is descriptive of how an artist reaches his voice. That is descriptive in the way that it tells how that artist reaches his voice. Because anybody familiar with Portrait of an Artist knows that it is it starts with these kind of weird little phonetics, because he's just a baby, and he's looking out on a pasture, and he sees cows, and he's like, moo cow and stuff like that, and then it slowly develops into what becomes a language that starts to become sophisticated, which is is considered like what people said was brilliant about James Joyce, and it is brilliant. Also, they said that James Joyce apparently was very, very influenced. It was like he was the very first generation of novelists that were influenced by cinema. Cinema had influence on writing the novel, as opposed to, and that was early cinema, very early cinema. Yeah, because I just got lost in thinking about Portrait of the Artist.
Well, that's
It's
okay.
such a good book.
We'll put a link down to it below.
You know,
okay.
Okay. So, how I figured it out, I talked a little bit about that before, and that really was kind of discovering how to write in these terse sentences. I already had a sense of how to write decent dialogue, and I was just honing that along with creating these little terse bursts of description to create the scene structure. That was working for me. Simultaneously, I learned how to outline. Now, outlining for me at that time was something I used a structure of 12 beats. I think in the beginning, the way I worked it out, and also the way I was taught, because there was various areas that I picked up some of the skill set that I had. I'd read, of course, The Art of Dramatic Screenwriting. Dramatic writing. I also was very fond of some of David Mamet's essays and books. I took a couple courses here and there. And so I distilled it down to writing a premise or a log line for the overall idea of what the story would be, and that premise or log line has is elastic in itself, meaning that it can evolve, it can change over time. You can always return to it and augment it in some way as you are going through the writing process. And then for each of the 12 beats of my screenplay, so basically when I say 12 beats, is if a screenplay is technically 120 pages, there's a beat for every 10 pages, all right? And then you're thinking of the story, and we're talking the story now, as an EKG, all right? So what I mean by an EKG, and you can also apply this to Christopher Vogler's ideas on the hero's journey as well. The EKG is like you are lifting off with your inciting incident. The inciting incident technically should occur anywhere from like the 5-page to like, well, in the old days it was like 5-page to 30-page, but like it's really just 5 pages now. You really don't go farther than that. And then what you do is you plateau off as you get towards the middle of the EKG. So that's like page 60, and that means basically that your characters or your protagonist is on his way to towards his journey, and so that's beat 6. And then on beat 9, you are coming all the way down on your EKG. You're spiking downward because they are facing all of their adversity and all of their obstacles that they must overcome, that they may never recover from. And then if they do recover and they do succeed and they win in the end, then that EKG comes all the way back up at 12. If they don't win, then that EKG comes all the way up at 11 and then goes sharply down at 12. So that is basically that 12-point beat outline. Now, with the 12-point beat outline, each one of those beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, has its own premise. So every 10 pages, or approximately 10 pages, because you don't have to adhere strictly to 10 pages, because maybe you have a shorter script, has its own log line. So you go, this is when such and such happens, such and such occurs. Cause and effect. It's a cause and effect statement. That is something that has a whole chapter in Lalou Segri's the art of dramatic writing, is the cause and effect statement. That goes all the way back. That can apply all the way back to the Greeks, and he takes it there. So you do that for each one of those beats, and then from each one of those log lines, you use those as a basis to work on, to script those 10 pages, or roughly those 10 pages. And then if you adhere to that, you'll probably get yourself a first draft. It may not be much of a first draft, but it'll be something that you can rewrite and that you can work on. Now, that was my process back in the early days. And that's how I figured things out. Once you're writing the second draft, once I was rewriting at that point, that's where I start to apply a little bit of those tricks, a little bit of the fun stuff. That's a whole other bit of tools and things like that. There's refining that goes in with that sort of thing. You want to look at your script as what is necessary in the story, and try to take out what is not necessary. Now, this is one thing that I do believe many storytellers fail to do. And it doesn't make them bad storytellers. It's just their choice. But some storytellers just overload their scenes, and they just want to do so much inside of the scene. And it's not that you don't need to do that to do a movie. To tell a story for the service of a screenplay that is to be interpreted into a movie or a film does not require it to be a play. You know, if you're going to make a play, you can make a play. You know, I write plays myself as well. I think that's fun, but it's not required. It's something that it's a story that you tell in pictures. If I want to strike another analogy, that analogy for me is that at a certain point for me, and this goes towards the root of the question, is that when you get you figure out your voice, it becomes a lot like playing music. And it's like you're not reading music anymore. While you play it, you're just kind of improvising a little bit, and you're just kind of like going with the feel, you know, while you're jamming or whatever. And the classic example for me is Thelonious Monk, because the thing about Thelonious Monk that I loved that reminds me of screenwriting is that he has this syncopation. It's also Ray Charles too. It's also a great one. He has this syncopation that it's not what he's playing. It's not the chord that he's hitting. You know, it's what's between it. It's the stop. It's in between it. That is where you feel the story he's telling in the music. And then the same thing, I believe, applies towards a good screenplay, you know. Yeah.
So it's within the cut.
Yeah. That's the other thing I like to talk about is telling the story in the cut. Telling the story in the cut is simple. It's a little simpler than I think a lot of people make it. And people tell writers and they tell filmmakers and they tell directors, show, not tell, show, not tell, show, not tell, show, not tell. And that can be kind of really confusing because it's like you listen to those words and you're like, okay, what the hell does that mean? What does that mean, really? Show, not tell. Okay, how do you show a screenplay? I don't understand what that means. It's like, and so like when you're a writer and you're hitting yourself with those words, like, oh, I don't get it. I'm telling intrinsically by writing it, and so it can be really confusing. But see, what it actually means is tell your story in the cut. Because, that is where the story actually lives. It lives in between the juxtaposition of two scenes. It lives in the transition of those two scenes. So the period between those two scenes is where all of the information of your story is uploaded. So all the exposition that you need to make in your story can be implied. It can be all implied. You don't actually have to say the exposition. Like I would say, like what? 70% of your exposition does not have to go into your script. It can be all in your because all you have to do is set up a visual cue with an action, and then cut to the end result of that action, to the aftermath. And just by doing that, just by putting one picture here, all right, and then putting the end result of that picture right over here, you've uploaded your exposition. Done. You know? So like the example I use is the girl, like, you know, at the bar, at the hotel bar, and the bartender comes up to her and gives her a drink, and then signals towards a man at the end of the bar who waves at her because he sends her to drink. And then cut to later, they're in a hotel hallway, stumbling into her hotel suite, kissing, and we know what happens. You know, we don't need to know what they discussed at the bar. We don't need to know what their conversation was. We don't need to know all the details in between. We get it. We get it. And it's a really, really simple technique. And there are a lot of filmmakers and writers that don't avail themselves of it. And there are a lot of writers that do. Number one on the list is Kenneth Lonergan, who is a brilliant writer, and he knows exactly how to do that. William Goldman also knew exactly how to do that. So, but yeah, it's a simple thing, you know. More people need to do it. That's all.
How did you get better at telling your stories within the cut?
Sometimes it was hard won, because I had this tendency, I think like a lot of new writers do, to want to fall in love with their language and to hold like some kind of like chunky like diner scene with like, you know, some interesting characters talking and like throwing some colorful banter back and forth and like, ooh, how interesting this is. And when I started to realize that it was unnecessary, and that not only was it unnecessary, that it was shooting myself in the foot as far as grabbing the attention of readers. It's not to say that those characters may not have been doing or saying anything that was interesting or fun or anything. It was dropping the ball, you know, in the ball game, as far as like making my work stand out for others. Because essentially what I learned is that in the long and short of it, readers aren't interested in your scene. They don't care about your scene. They care about the story you're telling them. That's what they care about. They don't care about your scene. They care about the story you're telling them. So if they fall in love with your story, they'll fall in love with your script. They're not going to fall in love with your scene. You know, they're not in it to fall in love with your scene. You know, so yeah.
Although there is something very charming about those diner conversations. I enjoy seeing them, you know, and then you've got Marge, the waitress, and all right, what'll it be? And then, you know, she leaves, and then they're trying to like talk, you know, so that she doesn't hear them.
That's a whole other, I mean, that's a whole other discussion. It depends on where it is, and it depends on how you do that sort of thing is one thing. And, you know, like, for example, one of my favorite diner conversations, of course, is because it's charged. You charge a scene. You charge a scene by telling it, by telling your story in cuts. All right, by loading your story like that. Heat.
Yes, excellent.
You charge. Everything is very, very sparse and very. There's not much going on in Heat other than the action, the reactions, the setups for the heist. It's very lean, Heat, and then it gets to that diner scene between Pacino and De Niro, and it means everything. That conversation means everything. And that's how you load those scenes, by you know, telling your story, and then you come to a scene where there is, you know, more or less, you know, a standoff. If it's not a metaphorical standoff, it's not emotional standoff. That's how you tell stories in general. You know, you can't have that standoff in every scene of your script. Otherwise, you're confused about what you're doing.
Sure, and then keeping it lighter, the 80s, 90s sing-along scene, which I don't know why they used for so long, where something's on the radio, somebody turns on a stereo, and now the whole group's singing together. That seems to be lost, and I'm happy that that's the case.
You know, I don't mind
No?
stuff like
You
that.
don't? Okay.
I don't mind anything that's experimental like that, as long as everything else is tight. You know, you can do anything experimental, but if everything else is tight, it will like rise to the top.
Okay.
I'm a personally, you know, I mean, it's not my favorite film, okay, but I am a sucker for that Hall & Oates scene in 500 Days of Summer.
Okay, all right.
I am a sucker for that scene because I've been that guy.
Okay.
I've walked out of that swinging like that.
Okay.
So I've been that guy. So I'm a sucker for, you know. So I mean, like, so if you do it right, you know, it flies. It flies.
Big Bear Mountain, a weightlifting competition, a stockbroker, 6 sisters, a plane crash, 3 pennies, gambling addiction, Friday at midnight, benefits of hard work, a man on the run, and lastly, this piece of dialogue. She ain't got time for that. Again, you don't have to use all 11.
Okay. You know, I've actually seen some movies about these things.
All right.
Let's see. Well, you know, a lot of these are really classic, and I mean, I'm almost inclined to like string many of them together into like to string some of them actually into like one. But I don't think I'll do that. So like, if I were to like take something like gambling addiction, I don't really think that that is a cause or an effect, so to speak. So you'd have to kind of develop a cause and effect around it. So, you'd have like something like a a police officer with a gambling addiction. Must must resolve his debt to a notorious gangster
Okay.
by murdering his partner.
The officer's partner or the gangster's partner?
No, the cop's partner.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So what that that creates is a cause and effect. It's not, the cause is resolving his debt. You know, it's not the gambling addiction. The gambling addiction is his I forget what it's. There's actually a name for it. I want to say misbehavior, but I don't think that's the correct one. It does not. It may predicate the cause, but it's not a part of the cause. The effect is that he has to kill his partner, which is kind of effed up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how that one would work. A Man on the Run. There's so many men on the run movies. You know, it's like things that always happens. You know, it's like the big cliche. Oh, A Man on the Run after a bank heist. Um, After a bank heist.
And this is not the officer?
No,
This is different.
completely
Okay.
different.
Okay.
After bank heist. I'm stuck here. After a bank heist, I want to say, but I don't think it's going to work. Must reconcile. This is dopey. With his daughter. Who ultimately turns him in.
Okay. It's getting interesting. Yeah.
Let's see. Let's take another one. 3 lucky pennies. No, or 3 pennies. Retrieved from the bottom of a fountain. Bottom of a fountain. Bestow 3 wishes. That reverse into curses. Ba-da-da-dum. Let's see. A weightlifting competition turns into weightlifting competition. There's another element that needs to be in there because there's no real cause established. A weightlifting competition. A weightlifting competition. No, that's because it needs a bodybuilder entering a weightlifting competition. Meets his lifelong idol, and has conflicted the long premise feelings competing against him after learning. This is a drama, of course. He's fighting cancer. what you want to do is you want to learn to make that shorter for you kids out there. Alrighty. Friday at midnight, a young, what's he do? A young high school dropout. In the 1950s, discovers his purpose. Fridays at midnight. Drag racing. At the local street. No, drag racing on the off streets of his small town. There you go. Let's see. What else we got here? Let's tackle She Ain't Got Time for That, because that one's just weird. That one's just odd. She ain't got time for that. A TV comedian is haunted by the role she played on screen. And becomes violently ill every time a fan utters her famous catchphrase. Catchphrase. Actually, I'm going to write this one. She ain't got time for that. You don't even know. You know, this is like, this got Netflix all over it. I'm telling you. You know, HBO Max and Netflix, they're going to be battling it out over She Ain't Got Time for That. No. All right. Let's see what else is here. A stockbroker. trading, and high finance. On Wall Street. Starts selling shares. Man. We'll just go from really fantastical. Starts selling shares in the afterlife. Done. Six Sisters. Six Sisters spelunking.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
Oh, it's cave diving.
Oh, okay. Oh, whew, all right. I wasn't sure where this was going. Okay.
Nether regions.
Oh, right. We wanted to keep it a Disney movie. So, okay.
Six Sisters spelunking.
Okay.
Get trapped in and losing oxygen. Must soon come to the decision of who lives or dies before someone rescues them. Someone rescues them.
How many do you have left of our 11?
1, 2, 3. Wow, I did all of them.
Great.
Okay.
Can you combine the remaining 3 into one logline?
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, this is pretty set up for me right there, to be honest. This one, it does have a cause. In Big Bear Mountain, the survivors of a plane crash. It's writing itself. Must save the injured through, I'll just make it simple, through the benefits of hard work and cooperation. Dun, 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 dun.
So which log line is your favorite that you've created?
Oh, that's
And why?
easy. That one's easy. It's a TV comedian is haunted by
Okay.
a TV comedian is haunted by the role she played on screen and becomes violently ill every time a fan utters her famous catchphrase, "She ain't got time for that." That's a winner.
And why does that resonate so much for you?
Well, it's not so much that it resonates. That's not at all why it resonates. The nature of a log line is a couple of things, and these many of these, if not all of these, and I was having fun, violate pretty much the strict rules of a log line, and one of those is brevity. A log line should be concise. That one's not so concise, but it does the other thing a log line should do. It grabs your attention. So technically, a log line is something that if you're over conversation, over dinner, you can say casually to your dinner guest or to whoever it is, or even if you're pitching it over dinner, and you can just let it roll off your tongue, and it have a sort of ring to it, and a ring and a verisimilitude, then usually or hopefully someone responds to it like, "Oh, well, that's nice. Oh, that's interesting. I'd like to see that." It's the thing that sort of makes you go, "I want to know more," and that's really the objective. That's the purpose of a log line, because it. I mean, well, okay. I'm gonna back that up too. The log line also helps you design your screenplay. That is one. That's another purpose you can use it for. But at the end of the day, when you're done with your screenplay and you've refined your log line and you make it concise, you need to be able to give it to the world and use it as a hook.
So a lot of the log lines that you came up with, you said they were too long, especially the one that you really loved, that it's got to be shorter. So if we were going to take, let's say, the log line for Fargo, I know you said you liked the Coen brothers' work.
Yeah, I love them.
Or A Serious Man or something. Like what how would we shorten that down? Because that would be hard. A Serious Man, that would be kind of difficult to have a shorter long line with that. I don't know.
I mean, if you look at, if you there are smarter men than me that have defined the log lines for those films, and you can look them up, you can Google them, and they're very brief. Actually, I've read one for A Serious Man, and it is kind of brief. If you want to borrow the allegory from something else to describe like movies like that, it's usually, it's not, you don't have to reach too far. Um, um, like, a what is it? A serious man's like a cancer diagnosis leads to a journey of discovery for a man that often considered himself invisible, and now comes to a sense of rebirth. I mean that's it's pretty simple, and what it is like, and if any writer or writer who's a reader, I would say, is like when they see a movie like A Serious Man, or they are familiar with the script A Serious Man, they'll go, well, this is just The Odyssey by Homer. It's it's the same thing, and believe me, the Coen brothers knew it was The Odyssey by Homer as they were writing it. It's kind of a blatant.
Who was Psy in The Odyssey?
I don't know, but I think maybe I would say he was the Cyclops. They've returned to the Odyssey again and again. They actually did an explicit interpretation of the Odyssey with "O Brother, Where Art Thou?" "O Brother, Where Art Thou" is the Odyssey beat by beat. Remember John Goodman at the tree with the patch on his eye? He is the Cyclops.
Mm.
So yeah.
And so with this, what would be the title for this comedian who's really just repulsed by this famous role that she's known for, and all the fans want to repeat it to her? What would you call it?
Oh, it's in the log line. It's the catchphrase. She ain't got time for that.
Okay. And why does that make her ill? Why does she not like that role?
Well, it makes her violently ill, like physically, in the way I would foresee it. So like, she would have actual physical reaction. She would convulse. And it would become progressively worse and manifest itself in probably some very gruesome, strange way. And take it to its inexorable extreme. So have fun with it. It's a very humorous premise, and I enjoyed it. I rarely actually write things like that, but I do find those kind of things entertaining. And what I end up doing is usually this: is like I take things like that and I make them quite serious along the way. That's why I like the Coen brothers, because they're satirists in a serious way quite often.
Do you feel movies today are less entertaining than they used to be?
Yes. That's absolutely. Reason why is because I think we're in a fallow period for movie making, and I think people are afraid of taking risks, and I think that a lot of movies are cookie cutter, and because of the way that the business is structured right now, it's not allowing for a lot of new talent to emerge and receive the kind of attention that it should. I think that there's periods where the pendulum swings on that, and that the opposite is the case. But right now we're in one of those fallow periods, and hopefully it will swing in the other direction. In the 90s, we had a very great, amazing era. I think it lasted a little bit into the aughts, but after that, it just went back to mostly studio fare. I have nothing against studio films, by the way. I think they're fine, and they're fun, but you need to have other stuff too. And we don't have enough of the other stuff. 70s, we had a lot of that other stuff. And now it's just another one of those periods where we just don't have a lot of that other stuff.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's just kind of the way the business has been structured, and it's kind of like we had a new influx of people into the system in the 90s from new kinds of producers, new kinds of executives. There is a legitimacy that that independent filmmaking received, in which it was actually was, if not prestige, it was given consideration as far as being having money-making possibilities. And some of those films did make money. But now the party is over. The movies that they acquire at places like Cannes and Sundance are already set up. It's like you don't get in there on a lark like you used to. You can't be a Wes Anderson. You can't be a Kevin Smith out of the blue. You can't be, you're already fully funded and backed by some kind of corporate arm that allows you those kind of opportunities. And that's just the case. Once again, I have no judgment over those things. It's just the way it is. I'm hoping that because of the streaming territory that we're in now, that sort of allows a little more wriggle room for that to see the light of day, in which there can be new kind of talent taking advantage of those sources. But I don't see where the evidence is of it yet. Hopefully there will be.
Do you think filmmakers are forcing a message in today's films?
I don't think that. I don't think that there's. Okay, that's a complicated question, and I'm going to answer it like this. I enjoy watching Martin Scorsese movies, and I really enjoyed watching The Irishman because I thought it was a great historical roadmap, and it had a greater message about the American story. And I am so glad that someone like that, even though he has to fight for it, given his status as a filmmaker, that someone like that has the luxury to have that kind of message that he can put forth in his films. But not everybody has that luxury, and not everybody has that kind of opportunity. And certainly, the new Martin Scorseses, the young Martin Scorseses, the female Martin Scorseses, the black Martin Scorseses, the Asian Martin Scorseses aren't getting that opportunity. And because they all have statements that they want to make about America. and those aren't sellable in today's market. Those aren't things that people want to to necessarily finance. And it is what it is. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, finances are bad or studios are bad and they're the boogeyman or anything like that. I think that's really a horrible attitude to possess. I think there's a lot of filmmakers that are proponents of a sort of victim-like stance. But that does not negate the fact that the current era we're in is not looking for a new voice vigorously.
So the Martin Scorsese that was able to tell The Irishman, how different was that person that told the story of Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle?
I really don't think much of a difference. I mean, I think it's the same spirit. You know, I think he's an incredible filmmaker, and he's evolved. Oh yes, but I don't think he is much different. But he was able to solidify a reputation, and I believe it was 1978 that Taxi Driver came out. Or was it 76 or 78? I think it was 76.
It seems like it was earlier, yeah, maybe 76.
But,
I'm not sure though.
But yeah, so he was able to settle a reputation down, and he could go on and continue to make personal movies like that. I mean, the same thing can be said for a lot of people in that echelon. You know, the same thing can be said for Spike Lee. You know, but even so, you know, Spike Lee has to fight to get financing because he's making movies that are about messages. He's trying to tell. He's got a message behind his story. You know, I remember years ago when he was still alive. I was watching a panel on Robert Altman. And he said, Robert Altman said, you know, it's like someone asked him, like in the panel, like, how do you get financing for your film? And he's like, I don't know. I find it just as hard to get financing as I think any young filmmaker would. This was like around 2000. He said this, and I tended to believe him. You're an older man, you know, who's trying to go out there and get financing to make a movie that says something, and people aren't looking to do that. And today, you know, we know what kind of movies get made. You know, it's like, you know, they don't want to, you know, and it's understandable. It's a business. You know, it's a business. They're looking for a return, and that's the other thing that I think that writers should be very aware of, that what they are in is a business. Now, you can consider yourself an artist, and that's absolutely fine. In fact, I'm a proponent for that. I consider myself an artist. Be an artist. You know, if that's what you want to be an artist. But don't get mad if you realize you're in a business, because that's what it is. You know, they're out there to make money. They're not out there to make art. You're out there to make art. They're out there to make money. You know, so yeah.
Do you feel like that's the real test of how long you want to stay in this business or attempt to stay in it, is to realize that? Well,
I mean, I think you realize what you do as a writer. You know, you understand where your lane is, so to speak, and that's not to say that you limit yourself to a track. It's to say that you are content and you're nourishing your creativity in wherever it is that you track. For like example, for myself, I write screenplays and I also write plays, you know, and I enjoy writing plays a great deal. I enjoy this theater. I enjoy that experience. You know, I enjoy working with actors in the terms of stage, but and working and staging the work and seeing it come alive in a room full of people where it's not projected on a screen. It's a whole other experience. But, you know, this is the thing, you know, this is all under the oath of, oh, this is what I do as a writer. It's not under the oath of what I do as a screenwriter. So at any one point or time, you know, I can take my frustrations to writing a play and go down the street, get some friends together, go into a theater and say, hey, let's hear this out loud. You know. So, I mean, that's my feeling on it. And there's plenty of other writers that do the same thing. You know, we've got writers that cross both fields. Aaron Sorkin, Tracy Letts, David Mamet, Susie Laurie Parks. These are all playwrights and screenwriters. Ask them what they do. Aaron Sorkin's never going to say, oh, I'm a screenwriter. Aaron Sorkin's going to go, I'm a writer. I write. That's what I do. You know? Same can be said for other people that cross the other mediums of writing. Stephen King. Stephen King's not going to say, yeah, I'm a screenwriter. Stephen King's like, I'm a writer. Stephen King's bigger than any one movie. So, yeah.
For a writer who's never submitted to the blacklist, how does that work?
The blacklist, I think it's important to point out, is you upload a screenplay to their website. And the website, more or less, is a collection of screenplays that are written by anybody. Anybody can upload a screenplay or a TV pilot to the blacklist. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are in the world. You can go ahead and do so. And those scripts are evaluated. Now, the one thing is, though, you're going to be paying a monthly fee, and that is, I think the monthly fee is $30 for that script to be hosted on the site. And for each evaluation, you must pay a $75 fee. Now, if you have the money to do that, which for some, that can be a little tight to afford, but if you have the money to do that, it's very much worth the while, because the blacklist is probably the main, it's the central access that you will have to the film industry these days, specifically if you're not in Hollywood and you don't have an agent or some kind of representation that can submit your work and get you meetings. If you don't have access to a representation, an agent, or a manager that can submit your scripts or get you meetings. So it's worthwhile to post your script on the blacklist. The other thing that's really wonderful about the blacklist is that the readers there provide coverage for your scripts. Now, this coverage is good in and of itself, of its own to promote what a concise understanding is of your story on your blacklist page. But it also is a great tool for you to know where the flaws are in your script. So you can use it as a balance sheet as to where you need to fix areas that may not be communicating well. If you are a new writer and you have trouble taking critique or receiving critique, it's a great baptism by fire. This is the other thing in regards to the blacklist is invaluable. As you develop your skills as a writer, you have for you right there at your disposal a barometer through which you can understand how strong your work is. So if you are getting recognition on the blacklist, and certainly if you're getting recognition regularly on the blacklist, you know that you're ready to go out into the field, or to march out into the field, so to speak. So if you are trepidatious about a screenplay that you are going to submit to an agent or a producer, if you are a little unsure or uncertain about something that you want to pass on for consideration to anybody, try and see if you can pass mustard on the blacklist. See if that script can get you a score of an 8 or above. If you are getting an 8 or above score on the blacklist, then I think you can be entirely confident that that your script has legs at that point. So I think that's what also makes it a wonderful tool. It's a very good site because what it does is it bridges the gap between the industry and pretty much anybody anywhere. It doesn't exclude you out of the process, whoever you are and wherever you are. Before the blacklist existed, we had this arcane version of that, and that simply meant that you had to be somewhat in the know or working in some strata of the industry to be able to get your scripts read by a reader at a production company or an agency or what have you. Instead, now you can just go online, pay the fees, and have a reader produce coverage for you that way. In the old days, in fact, they sometimes, if you were submitting your script to a producer, they'd ask to see your coverage instead of your script itself, so that they could get an overview of your script. And you go, oh, well, I have some coverage here. Let me send that on to you, and you can have a look. Here on the blacklist, they can simply go onto the blacklist, read your coverage, and then download your script. So it's great. And Franklin Leonard he's a really fascinating, inspiring character with what he's done here with his website, and also his advocacy and support of people in all areas of the writing field, and his strong stance on inclusion. So I can't say anything but good things about him and what he's done for the community.
What kind of feedback have you gotten on some of your work that's made it onto the blacklist?
Well, I've been lucky enough to score high a couple times. Yeah, I've had some good feedback. I think that as a writer, it's incumbent upon you to run that gauntlet. That you need to go on there and score high on the blacklist. This is where my pride will come out, or let's say my ego as a writer, where is like I need to see this script, this story, whatever, knock it out the park somewhere. So it's got to knock it out the park on the blacklist. It's got to knock it out the park on a spot on the Nicholl Fellowship. It's got to knock it out the park on say Austin. I've never placed on Austin, but I'm just going to say that it's got to knock it out somewhere. Once it's done that, then I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure it's a good script. Or I'm pretty sure it will impress somebody somewhere. So these are our tools today that we have at our disposal, at our fingertips, literally in front of us on our screens, that we can use as barometers for how good our work is. So they should be used. You should use them, and not be afraid. It's I know it can be really daunting to receive criticism and to allow others to look at your work. But this is the thing: is that first of all, you learn not to take criticism personally. That it doesn't mean that you should necessarily change anything that you're doing. It only offers you one thing. It's perspective. That's it. Criticism gives you perspective. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that I can judge the distance between what I'm going for and what lands. That's what that means. So if I'm hitting with something that where I was going for a target and I know it's hitting and I'm getting that feedback from somewhere else, an objective source, I'm getting that feedback, then I know I'm onto something. That's perspective. If you're getting something that's a little off to the side, if someone's going, I'm seeing this as something else, if someone's misunderstanding it entirely, then you might want to step back and adjust. You might want to go, oh, okay, wait, I'm gonna change how this, how the second act sort of moves right here, or I'm going to adjust, this aspect about the beast story, or I'm going to give this character a long lost sister. All these things can mean the difference between a good script and a great script. Perspective will give you that. Perspective will imbue you with that. And when you have that experience, you never take criticism personally. In fact, you invite it and you want to know, and you're curious about people's criticism, even if they're not, even if they are to a certain degree misguided criticism. Even misguided criticism can enlighten you as a writer and make you a better writer.
Say I'm a screenwriter and I upload my script to the blacklist and I pay my $75. Am I just getting a one-time feedback, some notes, or is that script now accessible to anybody
Yes, that is the case. Anybody can read the script on the blacklist. What's cool about that is that the designated readers that you pay for or hire to read your scripts will provide you with feedback, but also the people that or the industry folks that go on there and may stumble across your script or see your log line and just appreciate your log line also have the option to download your script. And they also have the option to offer you coverage. So that's a cool thing. I think it's rare that ever happens because I've never received coverage from someone that has just been perusing my script or just downloading it off of the blacklist. Now, more than likely, what does happen though is that you get a high score on the blacklist, and that's when you actually get attention from industry readers, and they'll download your script in numbers, but and that's what you want. That's what you want to try and do. You want to, it can, let me tell you, it can be expensive. If you're paying $75 a pop as you revise your script to try and make it better and better, so you get some kind of attention, that can add up after some time. But if you do, you score high, that can be offset by the fact that you're going to have, a lot of people downloading your script.
Because I just said, did you get any feedback? And you said you scored high. I don't know if we went into if there was any negative feedback, and maybe we don't want to go there. Or...
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's negative feedback, but that's a part of what screenwriting is. You need to get negative feedback at some point. You're not if someone is not going to like something that you've written somewhere, for some reason. What you need to know is why. That's it. You need to know is why. There's a meme that's circulating right now that that features Jordan Peele, and Jordan Peele says, you know how you handle criticism? This is how you handle criticism. When I have a screenplay and I send it out there and someone says, there's a scene in there, it's just way too violent. It took me out of the screenplay. I think you should do something about that. He's like, I don't go home and take that scene out of the screenplay. No. What I do is I go back and I work on that screenplay and find the thread that substantiates that violence. And I make that, I express that in a more succinct and better way. That's what he says, and I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he is expressing. And that's my exact same attitude. Negative feedback sometimes is your best feedback. Sometimes it gives you the best. You get breakthroughs, from negative feedback. Yes, absolutely.
So I have a little bit of a writing challenge we can try, and I'm hoping you can help me to make this small bit of information better. I'm going to read it to you. So my story is about a young writer trying to break through, whatever breakthrough means. We'll call him Joe. And he's a good guy from a small town. His parents were hippie artists, not a lot of money, but they supported his move to Los Angeles. And so while writing during the day and very tired at night from these humbling, like grunt jobs, Joe meets someone who decides to take him under his wing. And it's a producer who says, you know what? I like your work. It needs some polish, but I'm going to help you. And so the young writer, Joe, is just like, wow, this is my dream come true. I call my parents and they say, we're so proud of you. We always knew you'd succeed. And then after about a year, reality sets in for Joe. And Joe starts to see that he's being used and sometimes abused. And this producer not only steals Joe's ideas, but he has Joe do a lot of his personal dirty work, like go spy on his tenants, go spy on his wife, and also pick up his dry cleaning. And then he has him write scathing reviews on a former nemesis, and he takes those reviews and he uses them as his own, because he used to be in the literary world. So he has Joe, review some of this other person's work and then writes these reviews, and then he publishes them as his own. So how could we clean this up? This is about like a story of a young writer who's really hungry to be in the business, but he starts to see, wait a minute, I'm in a bad element right here. I'm in a bad way.
For those of you who have worked in the agency world, this is the story of an assistant.
Okay. Is that the log line? That's the log line.
No, it is. That's what it is.
Okay.
It's the story of an assistant. And it's the tame version.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right. Okay. So mine's for all audiences. Okay, great.
No, it's true, actually. Actually, some insistence would be like, oh no, it's much worse than that. So what's the purpose of this?
The purpose is to show a good guy with a good heart whose parents believed in him comes here and finds that his goodness is taken advantage of.
Okay, and my reflection on this is,
how can I clean it up to tell the story better? Because it's not just the idea, but it's how I'm telling it.
Well, first of all, you have to shorten how you say it. You have to turn it into a concise bit of wording. It has to become a log line or a premise. It has to be something that you can issue briefly, that has a bit of a snap to it, a bit of a hook, something that pulls you in. So that is number one. And so, not to say that it doesn't have it, but you have to find it in there. A story is sometimes like a block of marble, and you're the sculptor, and you have to find the form in the marble. What you have right now is marble, and you need to find the form. Michelangelo used to say, I don't know if you've ever been to Italy, but it's one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen is the David. But Michelangelo used to say that he would look at the block of marble and he could see inside of it the form. And it's proven that he did, because at the Academia where the David sits, it's flanked on both sides by his sculptures known as the slaves. And the slaves were unfinished because I think it was towards the end of his life. So Michelangelo basically chiseled straight into the marble towards the form. He didn't like other sculptors whittle all the way around the marble form to get to the form. He went right to it. So there'd be an arm sticking out of the block, there'd be a leg partially in the block, and the rest would be all just raw marble. So that's what you got there, is a bunch of raw marble. You have to get to the form that's inside. And the form would be the germ, the absolute germ of your story, the log line.
Okay, so maybe the log line, it's too long, but it could be a premise. You know, it could be, so the log line would just be one sentence, correct?
Yeah, technically it's one sentence.
Sure.
Or so. One or two sentences.
Okay, so then Joe, young writer, finds out that goodness isn't always rewarded in entertainment.
That's a little broad.
Is
Joe, a young writer is enthralled by a mentor in the Hollywood industry, and moves to Los Angeles to find success, and instead becomes enslaved to a powerful man. That's more along the lines of what you're looking for. I tweak it a little bit more, make it a little better around there, but yeah, that's what you'd be looking for.
Okay. And Joe, who would he have as sort of his supporting character? So we have this producer who's like the nemesis in some ways. And then would he have a roommate? How can we make Joe, his dialogue with someone to actually tell them about what's happening? Who would Joe be bouncing ideas off of in this story?
I don't know. You're telling me the story, so who do you think Joe would be bouncing the ideas off of? It sounds like you think there would be a roommate.
Or there could be a coffee girl. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there could be a coffee girl. Joe could be going through a lot of things. I mean, the question is, who is Joe? Who is Joe? Why is Joe?
I like that.
What really motivates Joe? That all tells you a lot of things as well. That you don't need to have attendant cliches to make any kind of story. In fact, avoiding them informs a very sort of often a unique way of subverting them. Avoiding them allows you to go down an idiosyncratic road where you start to come up with some really original stuff. So sometimes you want to get around that. It's like, why is it a coffee girl? What if he's gay?
That's true. Coffee boy.
What if it's what if it's a coffee boy? Roommate. Well, why is he? What if he lives? What if he lives with the producer? What if he lives in the producer's garage? He makes him live in the garage. What if he sleeps in his car? What if he sleeps in his car? Now something visually. Now I'm starting to think. What if he sleeps in his car? Lots of young people come out to places, and they're poor, and and they have to sleep in their car. That's something I read about. That's something I hear about on NPR.
Or a crummy weekly hotel.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these other things, roads you can go down to avoid those tropes. And it's good that you do, because you're going to get a more original piece of work out of it.
Okay, so I see. Yeah, so the cliche young writer with the proud parents back home, that maybe that's boring. Okay, so then what if we talked about what if the dad had a gambling addiction and he gambled away his college tuition, and so he wasn't able to get a creative writing degree, so he comes here to LA, and it's not a coffee girl. What if it's someone who does drag at night at a club
Okay.
and basically tells him the real deal and will just tell him how it is, and he trusts that person because they don't want anything from him.
Okay.
So then and he basically said, the let's say the drag is Terry by night and then Terrence by day. And then so make it interesting. Like, just not the typical.
That's beginning to be something I want to see or read.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
You're doing it. You're doing it right now. You're going down those off roads. And it's starting to make me curious to the point where, like, oh, that's something I haven't seen before. I'm interested in seeing or reading it. Here's a great test of writing something or anything for any writer, and it's a simple one. It's like, write what you want to see. Write the thing that you've never seen before that you're like, oh, I really like to see someone make a movie about that. What an idea. What a novel idea. I'll write the thing that's never been done that I always wanted to see done.
So then I have to ask, what happens to Joe, and how does he ultimately reconcile with that job or leave it? And then I have to plan out, does he quit? Does he get fired? Does something happen to the producer? Does the producer get arrested because maybe the producer had a shady business on the side that no one knew about? Maybe he was involved in he was part of a ring of automobile scams. Mm-hmm. So he was in on it with doctors, lawyers, workers' comp, all this stuff. So he's in on this, and that's how he was really making his money. Mm-hmm. And that's how he's funding the movies. Mm-hmm. And then he gets arrested, and there's a padlock on the house and the garage, and Joe's stuff is inside. He's got to get it out. So the sheriff has to come and let him in. And then he goes back home.
Well, yeah, you could do that. You
Okay.
could do that.
Okay.
You could do that. As long as it's organic. Mm-hmm. As long as you feel that it's organic. And what you're telling me sounds fairly organic. But if it's not organic, if anything happens that does not seem organic to you as the writer, you should run from screaming, run screaming from anything that doesn't feel organic and natural to the characters. And this is something we haven't talked about, is character. Is that your character, and what you've done is you built up a character profile more so than a log line or a premise, and through that character profile, you have used that as a template to draw out what potential actions would occur given that situation. So now since we know who Joe's character is, we get a sense of how that will play out. Character is a very, very funny thing. It's very, very funny. The reason why it's funny is because it's prescient. It's a cute little tool because it strings you along with like, oh, this is it's not going to go where you think it is, but in a way it always will. So it's this little trick. It's like, It's like, it like gives you enough breadcrumbs to go, okay, it's going to go exactly where you think it is, you know, but it's, you know, it's going to look like it doesn't, you know. And that's what you do with character. You set up the reader or the audience based upon the person's behavior. This also works in tandem with telling your story in the cut and loading up your exposition in between those cuts, because if you show the behavior of your character, for example, and you'll see this in stuff like Lonergan did this in Manchester by the Sea. It's like if you know, I go into a bar and I get into a brawl. You know, every time I'm going to go into a bar in this movie, you don't even have to see me in the bar. You know, you know there's going to be a brawl happening. You know, so that's the sort of thing that you can do with character that is really, really fun and is really, really rich. Yeah, that's basically that.
I feel like my character Joe is too much. He's too much of a good guy. Like, he needs some kind of quirk or idiosyncrasy. He's surrounded by interesting characters, but why would he stay in that situation? I feel like he's too flat. So I feel like I don't know who Joe is, I guess. He's just like this guy that's surrounded by all these interesting people.
Okay, who is Joe then?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. So Joe, maybe, his dad had this gambling addiction. He found out that his college education was gone. So,
well, if his dad had a gambling addiction, you know, well, he has to have some, you know, some serious resentments, you know, about that, you know, and those resentments probably manifest themselves in some kind of problem of his own. Addicts have a tendency to beget addicts. And certainly have a tendency to beget addicts in the terms of storytelling. So, you know, that's a very easy one to target. There's a ton of things you can choose from, a ton of psychological issues. It could be alcohol. He could be a cutter. It could be numerous things that you can use as tools, you know.
Right, so Joe's not just going to come out of the womb perfect then from being around that.
He wouldn't. No, he wouldn't come out of that perfect, because he's going to be resentful of his dad.
Sure.
You know, there's that dysfunction in his family is going to be manifest in him, even if it appears to be positive on the surface. That's always fun to do. Is to do that little ironic thing with a character, where the negative aspect of that character looks like it's positive at first, but it's actually, when taken to an extreme, it's negative.
Would you mind giving me an example?
Harrison Ford, Mosquito Coast.
So it looks as a positive, his
character.
Where
he's a good protective father, but instead he takes his family to some like remote location and like puts them through hell.
Okay,
you know?
I see.
It's, you know, you can take things that are good and you can make them at an extreme bad at any time.
Okay, so then maybe the movie opens with he and his dad betting on football games, and it's a father-son bonding, and you think, wow, they have such a great relationship. But then you realize that some serious issues are happening. He's owed money. He has a bookie that he owes money to, and it's getting out of control. But you don't see that at first. You just see this father and son watching these games, and you think, wow, that's really neat. Like, they have this close relationship.
Yeah, yeah. And to a certain extent, his father can be a good father.
Sure.
He could be a good father, but still be, this kind of loser. There's tons of humans like that.
Sure, male or female, yeah. And so then I'm trying to think though how Joe would be scarred from that, but I think that's where my trouble lies with this character. Is Joe is too perfect, surrounded by some people that they're not damaged. Maybe they're just very interesting people, and I've got to make Joe not so one-dimensional. I think that's my problem. Is that everyone else is more lively than the protagonist.
Yeah. Or you can do some crazy stuff.
Let's hear it.
Well, I mean, what I mean by that is that there's other areas that you can go. You can go down the line like you're suggesting, or you can start to get meta with your character. You can trade off your character with other characters in your story. You can make it appear to be about Joe, and then it actually starts to turn to be about somebody else in the story. Sometimes the Coen brothers will give equal parity to some characters, and you'll go like, I thought the story was about this guy, and why is it now about this guy? And that's because they're adept at pulling that off. I wouldn't suggest that a new writer should go out the gate and try things like that, but you can do stuff like that. It's if you are writing and you're having fun and you're in the zone, so to speak, you shouldn't be limiting yourself on ways that you can tell the story if the story wants to go there, if it's organic. If the story doesn't want to go there, then you don't go there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I really need to rework this character because I'm not clear on who he is. I feel like I'm clear on some of the people around him. And he's not damaged enough or fully formed.
See, well, what would you do in this case? So, once again, have you written a screenplay before?
I have not, no.
Okay. So how would you approach writing this?
Well, I think I would try to outline it. So
okay.
I would maybe do, I know what's been popular is 24, I think it was Adam Skelter talked about, he had a teacher that did the 24 plot points or whatever, 24 beats or whatever.
Which is the same as 12. But.
It's 12, okay, all right, which is doubled, yeah. And so I'm going to have the opening of maybe on the couch, and so all right, we got the popcorn and all the stuff for the game or whatever. Maybe they're drinking together. Joe's over 21, and it looks like they have this great moment. So I'm gonna go from there, from that number one opening, and start. And then we're gonna see some stuff unravel at home. Maybe some yelling with the mom, and then. The hard discussion about, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to get to.
Yeah, but whatever. After you're done with all that, and you get all those points in there, you're gonna write it, right?
Sure, in screenplay format. Yeah. Okay. So I may have screenwriting software.
Okay. Uh-huh. And then when you're done writing it, you're going to have. Hopefully something that's going to be around like 80 to 120 pages, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then once you have that 80 to 120 pages, the whole world changes. And I don't mean necessarily the world of the script. I mean your world. Because you are going to come and look at that script with new eyes. And the new eyes that you bring to that script is going to have a profound effect on your protagonist and that main character. None of anything that you come out with as an idea for like an outline or a thought like that is going to magically crystallize into the exact thing that you want. What happens, at least to me, quite often is that I'll start off with a vision of what I'm going for. And then along the way, that vision changes. And then towards the end, it really starts to really dovetail towards the vision, the original vision, but not how I've expected. Never how I expected. It dovetails towards the original vision, but never down the road I expected to get. That's when I know that it's organic. Because I will sit there and I'll go like, you know what? This is what I want to do. This is what new writers have to learn how to do. To make the Sophie's choice between what you want to do and what's best to do for your script. You know, you might sit there and go like, you know what? I really want to do this because this is how I thought of it. No, that's not best to do for your script. What's best to do for your script is this over here, because it's where your characters want to go. It's where your story wants to go. So you need to go in that direction. And you keep going into that direction until it all falls into place. That's the way it works. It doesn't work any other way, you know. And I would defy any successful writer to say anything otherwise about that experience. It happens like that. It's like you're like, wow, it all worked out in the end, you know. But never to a T what you have going on up here at the beginning.
Okay, so I won't really know what I'm working with until I take those 24 points and then I put them in screenplay format, write anything from 80 to 110 pages or thereabouts, and then maybe wait on it a week or so, and then I really am working with the beginning of the marble.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Ernest Hemingway had a famous phrase, and I'm going to use the sanitary version. Is that every first draft is crap.
Okay.
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 Or poop. Okay?
Right. Yeah. We'll keep it. Yeah.
Every first draft is poop.
Okay. Good.
Okay. And that is a perennial. It'll never go away. For time and memoriam for everybody. You know.
Right.
Every first draft is poop.
Okay.
Even if you think it, you're like, no, this is great. No, it's poop. You know, you're going to come back and you're going to look at it and it's going to come together. The other thing about that is, and this is something every writer should know, really at the end of the day. With my familiarity with the process and with all the writers that I've known on so many levels, successful, otherwise, and everything, there's no such thing as a finished screenplay. That medium never is complete. You may think it's complete. It's never complete. A screenplay is finished when the director calls action. That's when it's finished. There's no designated finish to a screenplay. And if a writer ever takes that for granted, they're not doing their job. Writers should always be ready to come up to bat and say, I can make it better. Or I can do this. I can like communicate this better. I can do if you're like on set and the director is shooting the film and he says, you know what? Tomorrow I'm about to shoot these like 5 pages. I'm not feeling it, and the producer's not feeling it. Can you go back and rewrite them? You're going to go back and rewrite them. You're not going to say, I'm done.
Okay.
You're not going to go, oh no, it's finished. David Fincher, it's finished. It's finished, David Fincher. I mean, no, that's all you get out of me. You're not going to do that. You're going to go home that night and you're going to rewrite those 5 pages for David Fincher, and you're going to bring them the next day, and that's how it's going to go down. So yeah, there's no such thing as a finished screenplay.
Okay. And so is it when the director calls cut, or is it when he calls action, or she calls action?
It's when he or she calls it action.
Action.
You know?
Okay.
It's like because they're shooting it. I mean, hopefully they don't rewrite your movie in post. But sometimes they do.